That Bishop Kevin Bond and his church Citadel are still in their building this Sunday morning, October the 19th, 2025. I was under the impression that they had reached their last Sunday, but he was featured on the news in the Bronx or in Brooklyn, and I was able to see that clip. I know that they're also saying that they have been mistreated and that their church is going under injustice, and they plan to have rallies at their church and also having prayer vigils at their church, in addition to communicating with the media. But this is why it's very important for pastors and churches to be fiscally responsible. One of the things my relatives did, my former pastor, he raised the money because you can't rely on tithes and offering. You can't rely on people. People will change on you in a minute. You can pour your life and pray and cover and love church people. They'll be with you today and they'll be gone today. And this is why you have to prepare for any type of circumstance and not be counting on the offering of people's tithes and offering. Church people will turn against you, family will turn against you, the community will turn against you. It took 30 years and we saved $300,000 and we were able to pay for our church, a new church that was built from the ground up. And we went through so much controversy because the contractor we had at the time stole at least $100,000. And then we were put in a bind in which our leader died, our pastor passed away, my relative, and we had to raise more money. And people went into their savings and other accounts and were able to get that money because, see, the devil thought we weren't going to get that church. Anything that could happen. The church even sat there a while and deteriorated. When we got the new contractor, we were able to replace the wood. And if they had gone with the contractor I suggested in the first place, we wouldn't even be having this problem. But people laugh, people talk, but they can't laugh now and they can't talk because the church is built. We've had the opening services and following services, and everything in the church is paid for. The pews, the furniture, the sound equipment, the microphones. Um, we have a paved driving lot part. We have a parking spots that are paved. Um, all the outside, inside fixtures, everything is paid for, and to God be the glory. Now, this is what I wanted to say to Pastor Kevin Bond. You and to all pastors and churches, we didn't want to take out a loan because you can't take out a loan because, like I say, we are in a racist society. They don't want to give you a loan in the first place. And then when they give you a loan, they're not going to give you the best loan. They're going to give you a loan uh, with high interest rates, high payments, because they want you to fail and they're hoping to take your property. We got in that situation too because our contractor did not pay. He didn't pay the electricians, he didn't pay the plumbers, but he stole all this money. But then again, he said he did pay them, so we don't know if he paid the people or not. But one of the people, a clear person, the plumber, came back and sued our church, which he shouldn't be allowed to sue our church because, first of all, the statute of limitations was over. Second of all, he knew that the contractor cheated us and also cheated him and other parties. So really knew we weren't guilty and shouldn't have been held responsible. He sued our church for $30,000. And then we found out when the new contractor came with that crooked judge, which I tried to and see all these people work together, they're friends. When I called the state attorney general's office, they told me to call back at a certain time so I can file to get a judicial review of this certain judge. And then by the time I called back, he conveniently retired. And the people in the attorney general's office acted like they didn't know what I was talking about, even though I had an email with the person's name in it and I had taken notes to call back at this certain time and date so I can file a complaint against this particular judge because he They didn't go through the proper system of serving serving the court papers. The timeline was all wrong. Everything they did was corrupt and against the law. And our own attorney, our church attorney, told us this. And he really could have made a fuss and got that thrown out, but we just wanted our church back. So we ended up paying that dirty plumber $30,000. And come to find out that we paid for him for a job he really didn't do because the contractor told us the pipes were cut. So, and then I'm angry with the police department because when our alarm went off, they take their sweet time to come. But when this white man, racist white man, crook and thief, said that we end up having to have papers served. So the contractor had to get off the property. The cops hurry up and came and told him to get off the property. And none of that should have never happened. And the pipes were cut. We paid $30,000 for pipes that were cut. But see, I even filed papers with a federal judge to try to get them to sue. But at that point, we didn't want to get any more lawyers. And we didn't want to get any more lawyers at that point. That was the decision of the board. But really, when you're building new churches, it's best to just go somewhere, save your money, and pay cash if you can. Don't get loans. I know that our leader, my former pastor, he also tried to get people, he had a plan to help everybody get out of debt, but they didn't want to do it. He was a visionary and before his time. He was trying to get the families in the churches to help each other to get out of debt. And I really am not sure of all the injustices that Pastor Bishop Kevin Bond went through, but I love this church. I wish I had the money, but I think they borrowed $500,000 to get in this church. And of course, with COVID and the pandemic, that caused many churches to close. People stopped coming in the building and many people have not returned to the building. They're looking at church online or they abandoned church altogether. But we were fortunate in our church that people kept giving. We were very fortunate.
Away from shutting its doors after years of financial struggles. News 12's Daniela Rodriguez was at an emergency prayer vigil meant to help save the holy place of worship.
Nadia, tears pooled in the eyes of Bishop Kevin Bond as he told me about the financial hardships from day one of moving into this location in 2016. Tonight, churchgoers walked up and down pews, chanting out in prayer to save their church. The Citadel Cathedral of Praise and Worship has physically been in the community since 2016. Bishop Kevin Bond says it's everything this block needed.
Since we've been here, crime has been down so much within this radius of our church.
But just last Thursday, the church was sold to someone at auction for nearly $1.2 million. Bishop Bond says they purchased the church for over double the amount, but were short $500,000, prompting them to get a loan from the Metropolitan New York Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church for that amount.
We were unable to keep up with the payments on the mortgage that we got from the Lutheran Synod. And so they foreclosed on it.
I called the Synod and the person who purchased the church at auction last week and have not heard back. Despite this, there's still hope to save the church. That's if they come up with the funds to pursue a redemption.
We are a church that's filled with people who are just regular, working, God-fearing people.
But the church has to come up with that money by tomorrow, or else they will have to close the church's doors for good and find a new location of worship. In Cypress Hills, Daniela Rodriguez, News 12 Brooklyn.
And this is why you really have to teach the people in your congregation about giving. And there have been a lot of lies about tithes and offering, but I hope you study your word and know the word for yourself. Tithes was before the law. Melchizedek, Abraham paid tithes. And of course, they paid with animals and um, livestock and things and grain. But we today, we get our earnings from money, and you pay money to whatever else you want to support, whether it's your fraternity, so your sorority. But when it comes to church, everyone has an attitude. But you want the pastor at your funerals, you want him at your graduations, at your wedding, when you're sick, when your family has emergencies, at the birth of your child, and so many other things that happen in life. But we don't want to put the church has been the nucleus of the black people and black society. It helped us to get through civil rights. And it's just a shame that we let the devil trick us. But see, the fact is that you got to give your money to the right church, and you can tell the right church by the life they live. If they're not living what's in that Bible, find yourself another church. That's how you solve that. And you got to have a financial system within your church where you can make sure that people are not stealing money from the church. My relative dealt with that, and he had to change people and change how they took up money, how they recorded money, and how they deposited money in the bank, that entire financial system, because people were stealing money. Every church my dad went to, people were stealing money. And they were very angry with him because he put a stop. It came to a screeching halt, and the people who were stealing had to go back to work. And then, people had the gall to talk about the pastor's children, and you were stealing money. All of a sudden, the deposit slips disappear. All of a sudden, the financial statements and books disappear. You tell the pastor, his wife, the family, the financial team, you tell them that the records were lost. No, the records weren't lost. You threw them away. So you could steal money. But that's just, and see, I think that cut that person life short. That cut their life short. But also the fact they didn't want to do cancer treatment. They didn't want to do chemo and radiation. But sometimes I believe, because when you do wrong, you're gonna pay for that wrong. You do evil, God see you. And sometimes people are sick because of the sins that they commit in their life. And And then you have the nerve to say, make all kind of comments, say that it was the pastor daughter fault that people left the church, and that wasn't even true. And you turn your children get angry with the pastor's daughter or family because of some lies you told and some things that you misrepresented, but you were stealing money from the church. But anyway, you got to have your you got to protect the integrity of the church and make sure that you have competent, trustworthy people, even if you got to change financial officers. And pastors should never have access to money. And you should have the same family members if you can help it, because sometimes churches are small and sometimes you have the same family members on the financial team, but avoid that as much as possible. But I'm praying for Bishop Kevin Bond, and this is a church that gospel singer, the Duke of Gospel, James Hall, attend. If I had the money, I'd write you a $500,000 check. But I don't have money like that, and I don't have access to money like that. But I'm praying that they're able, that God will work a miracle and whatever injustice, because I know about the injustice. That's what I was talking about earlier in this video. Injustices that they do to African American people, that they do to Black people, that they do to the working class. And we're seeing more and more injustice under this president's administration than we've ever seen in our life. And it goes back to a prophecy of my relative that has gone on to be with the Lord, that he said when I was in my teens, when I was in elementary school, that there will be so much racism in this country. Racism will destroy America, and that they will turn back the hands of time, and Black people will walk back into slavery. And if we're not seeing that now, with the Voting Rights Act and how they're deporting immigrants, trying to deport citizens, assaulting American citizens. ICE is assaulting American citizens of all colors, and they're trying to take away, stopping funding, and trying to take public education away, taking scholarship and funding for people to go back to school and get their bachelor and master and doctorate degree and to further their education so they can get better jobs, laying off 300,000 people, black women from federal jobs, laying off and shutting down the government, and not paying people, but yet these politicians are still getting paid. Their insurance is better than our insurance. The president's still getting paid. He's still paying the military troops, but he making other federal government workers suffer. All this injustice that's going on in this land. We just had the No Kings rally yesterday, and we need to do more protests. Maybe we need to not be nonviolent because this president doesn't get the message. He needs to get out of here. But anyway, I'm hoping and praying pastors come up with and trustee boards and come up with a system. And even when you have Sundays where your church is closed, still take up an offering. But some people abuse things. Like I used to be a member of a church that tell you your tithes and offering had to match. Now, if I had the money, I'll give it. But there's nothing in scripture that says, okay, if my tithes $1,000, my offering has to be $1,000. I don't know any scripture that support that. But if I had the means, I would pay it. But if not, I can't do that. But there's no scripture to support that. Your tithes is 10% and your offering is free will. Now, I most definitely don't agree if your tithes $1,000, your offering is $2. Now, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You ought to do a little bit better than that. But we give out financial statements every year. There's some churches that don't give out financial statements. People don't know what's going on. There's no integrity. There's no system of checks and balances. There got to be a system of checks and balances in your church. And you got to keep people informed. Your financial committee got to meet every month or every 2 weeks to stay on top of things and make sure the bills are paid and that money is steadily coming in the account and that you're saving money. And you shouldn't have, and this is the problem I have with the pastor we have now. He have too many programs. And when you're going into the red, you have so many programs. And I don't believe in paying pastors $100. $100 won't fill a tank of gas. You ought to at least give the pastor $300 for coming to speak at your church, depending on the size of your church and how many members you have. Our church is small, but you most definitely shouldn't pay a guest speaker $100. I think that's a slap in the face, and our former pastor would never do that. But you don't need a program every month. You don't need a program every week. No, you don't. People need time to be with their families and time to fast and pray and study the scriptures at home and take care of their affairs at home and time to raise their children. You don't need to be in church 24 hours a day. I love church, but it's not possible. You have other responsibilities because there's scriptures in the Bible that support working on your marriage and teaching your children at home and the women being keepers of the house and having a prayer and study time. But you can't do that if you're always on the move. But we just got to balance things out. But I'm praying that Bishop Kevin Bond and their congregation will save their church and be able to stay. And whoever bought that church for less, that wasn't fair. And somebody needs to volunteer an attorney's services so they can sue. I'm sure there's some type of discrimination and racism involved.